Sean McBride, born in 1904. As I said, his dad was John McBride. His mom was Maud Gonne, right? Pretty cool name. She was also an Irish revolutionary. And before she shacked up with John McBride, she was a love interest of W.B. Yeats, which adds again to the ironic twists of everything, right? Yeats then, immortalizes, uh, the guy who he think you could say took his girl, right? Right. Uh, but he put him down. He cast him down as a hero, John McBride, right? So Sean's mom is Maud Gonne, and when the father was killed in the Easter Uprising, she took Sean back to Ireland uh, in 1916, right, where he became, he went to school there, and 3 years later, he joined the IRA in 1919. Sean McBride was 15 when he joined the IRA. And 2 years later was the War of Independence, 1921, right? So he was 17 years old during that, right? During the War of Independence, and fought alongside, Michael Collins, and like all that. And when Collins got the treaty, that 1921 treaty that he signed with the British after he got the British to surrender, right, and leave Ireland, you got that 1921 treaty, which became known as the partition treaty, which is the situation that you look at Ireland that it is today. You have 26 counties in the Republic, right, and then you have 6 counties that are under British fucking dominion, right? And that's from that 1921 treaty, right? For those, who may not have known that, right? So Michael Collins gets assassinated. He gets got, which is crazy because that dude was the illest. That dude was ill in terms of the way that he moved as a leader of a military, right? A guerrilla military. Shit was ill. Like that movie that was done doesn't do justice to that dude's military mindsets, But Michael Collins was shot. There was a civil war, right, within Ireland then after the War of Independence, which tends to happen, right? That seems to happen a lot after a country gets free from a colonizer, right? And the Civil War was over the treaty, the agreement. There were those in the IRA that said, "Yo, Ireland is not fucking free. We didn't free this shit yet. It's not all free. We got to get the remaining 6. We got to keep fighting, right?" And then there were those that said, like Eamon de Valera. Well, later, de Valera, strike that from the record right now, because de Valera could have been. I don't want to throw too many names out here right now. That shit was a big thing. There was a civil war, and Sean McBride was put in prison, like a number of IRA people that were against the treaty. And he watched former comrades line their former comrades up against the wall and execute them firing squad style, like the British did to his father, right? This is how ill the history gets over there, right? He is freed after the Civil War, whatever thing frees shit, right? And he basically, I have this all right. I should probably just read this straight off the page right now, man. I like going off the page, though. You know what I mean? But Sean McBride is freed off the Civil War. He was against the treaty, right? In 1931, he becomes the chief of staff of the IRA, right? But then he quits in 1937. 6 years later, he quits the IRA in 1937, and he kind of has a vision, that Ireland could and should be liberated and united through what's called constitutional nationalism, the non-physical force response to imperialism. And he starts a political party in 1948 around, or right? It's crazy Irish, like Clan Poblacha, some shit like that, right? But even though he steps away from the IRA, right? He was a prisoner. He was a political prisoner, and he never forgot, right? So he went on to defend other Irish Republicans in court for like years after, maybe the rest of his life. Again, Sean McBride, and this is why Wilson sought him out, I believe, was like he was born in war, right? Yet he died in peace, right? He was born into war, yet he went on to dedicate his life to peace, right? That's deep shit, that's real shit. Like, who is this guy, Sean McBride? Sounds like an interesting dude. First time I read about him was in Wilson's book, right? Coincidence, I'll throw it up there again. And sounded like a powerful person because fast forward to 1961, MacBride starts Amnesty International, right? Which is well known now around the world. Starts it with a friend of his, and he becomes the chairman for the next 2 decades, 20 something years, right? And Amnesty International, what is very interesting about them is the fact that, they work as on behalf of prisoners, right? On the international scale, right? And their approach is they're able to break down 2 or 3 classes of prisoners, right? Like all being political prisoners, right? One are the political prisoners who are put in prison, who are nonviolent, right? Who are not in jail for doing some violent shit. Those prisoners are the people that Amnesty International does activism for. Creates pressure to free them from prison, right? Then there are the political prisoners who are in prison for political violence, right? And Amnesty International won't advocate for their freedom, but they will monitor the situation, and they will report, and they will basically seek to ensure that them and obviously the other prisoners are receiving basic human rights while in prison. Prison talk is like a big thing here on the internet. You know what I mean? It's like a growing like genre of fucking of like YouTube channel, right? I just gotta say prison talk, prison talk, prison talk. Maybe me just saying hashtag prison, will fucking get a whole bunch of viewers or some shit, But not to make light of it, that's real shit, because one of the things that we see, right? If you watch some of these prison shows, right, or people who are in prison speaking about the prison experience, is you see the notion in America, forget about the rest of the world, where human rights is fucking thrown right out the fucking window, man. How many stories have we seen recently of fucking prisoners being fucking executed by guards over some bullshit, or prisoners killing each other? You know what I mean? Like, human rights not being fucking observed in those situations. So Amnesty International, they're trying to do like a small thing, right? Yet dropping seeds of inspiration for so many other organizations that came afterward, right? There was a third group of prisoners that Amnesty International also worked with, and those were the ones that believed that they were like set up or framed in some way, right? And Wilson, in his interview with MacBride, asks him about that too, right? And You know, this is a talk, a rap about the interview. You know, you want to hear what was being discussed in the interview itself. I recommend just buying the book and finding the interview and reading it yourself. You know, because there's a lot of value in just doing that. I'm not gonna just read it to you right here. I'm just giving you my thoughts about it. You know, and why this dude Sean McBride was someone that Wilson sought out, right? Because, like I said, this guy went mega international in 1961 when he and his buddy formed Amnesty International, right? And the guy just kept moving forward to help as many people as he could on a large scale, while also micro, right? Uh, he was working to defend the rights of Irish Republicans in Ireland, and the idea of political prisoners, that is a huge thing within the history of Ireland and Irish republicanism. The most prominently known story about around all that is, if people are even hip to it still, the story of Bobby Sands in 1981, and which was immortalized, if you will, right, by the great film director Steve McQueen, and the fucking fantastic acting of Michael Fassbender in that fucking amazing movie Hunger. It's Steve McQueen's first movie. If you're a McQueen fan and you haven't seen that movie, I don't know. I don't know if you really know Steve McQueen's work, but that's an amazing movie, and it only touches on the long, fucked up, full of suffering tradition of the struggle for Irish prisoners, political prisoners, to maintain political prisoner status while they were in prison. For most of us who don't know that much about that shit, it's like, what the fuck does it matter, man? They're blowing shit up. They're fucking murking motherfuckers. They're killing people, like they're in jail, right? Doesn't everyone have to wear the same fucking clothing? Well, this is a notion of the struggle of asserting, seeking to emphasize that the war that the IRA was fighting, according to them, was a war of liberation, and it was an actual war. And so then therefore they were soldiers, and then if they were put in prison, they were political prisoners, just like soldiers who fought in World War II. You know, when American soldiers were in prison, and British soldiers were imprisoned by Nazi Germans during World War II, even the motherfucking Nazis allowed them to wear their own fucking clothing, to congregate as a unit, to have their own fucking political prisoner status. Think about that. Even the motherfucking Nazis allowed British and American soldiers to be political prisoners, right? Um, that tradition within Ireland and the relationship with the British ruling elite, that's been a long, long struggle. It wasn't just 1981 with this notion of being recognized as a political prisoner, right? The Before Bobby Sands, there was another hunger strike right before then, because during the 70s, the IRA people in jail were able to finally get recognized as the political prisoner status that they wanted, right? But then 81, Thatcher took that away, right? And that's how that whole Bobby Sands and the other 9 people who went on hunger strike after that all started from that, right? So reference that great movie Hunger for a little bit of historical research on that. You know, if you're not already hip to that, a lot of people are still, right? But I'm saying that to emphasize how deep, like, this notion of prisoners and being a fucking prisoner, right, goes in this Irish Republican tradition, and fighting for your rights even while you're in fucking prison, right? And that's some ill shit, you know. And McBride was able to elevate something within himself, and because a lot of people who were, say, in the IRA and fought in the War of Independence, and then they were against the treaty, and then afterwards, after the Civil War, they got fucking pissed. They didn't want peace. They wanted more war, right? Like MacBride went this other direction. There's these two directions that these Irish Republicans go, right? Like ballot, bullet, right? So MacBride was working on an international level to try to create organizations to influence the ballot, if you will, consistently, constantly, working until the age of 84, right? In his later years, he did a lot of work to help, uh, you know, liberation movements in Nambia, in Africa, and also took played a large part in this boycott of the Afrikaans, right? The rulers of South Africa in the apartheid state. The Boer, don't want to go. Those motherfuckers before Mandela and the ANC, was able to rise up and take power. Sean McBride played a large part in a boycott that was being done in Ireland from retail workers at a store, like a retail store, who didn't want to sell the goods of the people that were oppressing the black people of South Africa, right? This was Irish people standing up in unity, and recognizing other oppressed peoples and wanting them to have their own national liberation too. That's another side of the story that never really gets across much, of how often uh, some of these Irish Republicans went totally international, right? And building with people all over the world, right? Of, this rising of consciousness of people seeking to have their own autonomy in their own national territory, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? So MacBride, he was tireless in his activism until his dying day, right? And carried carried himself, call him Ireland's son, right? Of the work that he put in all his years, born in war, and died in peace, if you will, a simplistic breakdown. But that sounds kind of hot, right? Sean McBride, some of these Irish motherfuckers, they know war. They know war very well. It's deep, epigenetically imprinted in these motherfuckers' life, man, But the hardest thing is to find that peace, right? And Padraig Pearse used to say that Ireland unfree shall never be at peace, But if one is not at peace, how can one be truly free, right? So there's that balance, and that's consistently there. Bob Wilson found that in his studies of Irish culture, Irish literature, that oscillation of war and peace. I mean, that's a human trait. Every humans go through that. Every humans have their drama story with it, But he dove into the Irish story, and appreciated the drama of it, and that aspect of that he loves so much about James Joyce, who put so much of this within his work, Ulysses and Finnegan's Wake, especially Finnegan's Wake, this falling and this rising, right? This falling and this rising, and how Joyce was able to relate that on this mythic level, this mythio-poetic level, putting all these world cultures together in his mishmash of an amazing book, right? Yet this falling and this rising, and here we are. It's Easter again, and it's this time of rising, right? Time of ascension, and we all fall. Some may say, I mean, this life is a fall. I mean, you're born, and we're all gonna fall, right? Someday, right? And but we never know, when we rise again, in which form it might take, And Wilson got a great interview with Sean McBride. He was thought it was going to be another home run. He sent it to his regular publisher of his interviews, and they actually paid him, I think, but they didn't publish it. Gave him a kill fee. And he said, he scratched his head. He was like, well, That's weird. This is a great interview. This is the guy who founded Amnesty fucking International. You know, he took it to another publisher, magazine publisher in Europe. They wouldn't publish it either. Stage scratching his head. He might took it to another place. Nothing. The first time that interview with Sean McBride got published was in his book, Coincidence, in 1988, right? And he never really touches back on that. He just scratched his head. He's like, that's weird, man. Well, this is it. Wilson, who was part of the counterculture, anti-censorship, anti-obscenity, anti-censorship movement in America, may have hit face-to-face the censorship that existed in Ireland, England, maybe other places of Europe, but definitely Ireland and England in the 1980s. Believe it or not, there was in the major media in Ireland in the 80s a huge propaganda machine toward relating the story of Irish republicanism. Because in the 1940s, the IRA was made illegal, right? And it went underground ever since, right? And even though there's massive support there's tons of everyday people in Ireland in that time who are supporters of the IRA, you know, this shit doesn't get through in the propaganda machine, right? And when people are blowing shit up, it's very easy to make them look like some bastards for blowing shit up. And there was a strong propaganda machine in the Republic, as I said, also in England, where definitely in England they had this, where they would show the face of someone like Jerry Adams, but they wouldn't play the voice. They wouldn't even let the voice be heard of the Irish Republicans. They wouldn't even let the voice be heard. That is censorship. That's censorship. So they would have the voice of an actor dubbed over, right? So then the great Steve Coogan, the fucking hilarious comedian that he is, back then in the 80s, there's a clip, you know, he's pretending to be an Irish Republican being interviewed, right, by some reporter on this major news station. And before he answers the question, he takes a big fucking hit off a helium tank and he's answering the question to alter his voice, you know, making fun of that bullshit, right? So Wilson confronted a new type of censorship, or an old type of censorship, really, right, out there in Ireland and England when it came to the voice of Irish republicanism. Now, you might say, what are you talking about, man? That's MacBride. MacBride was interviewed on the BBC, all these fucking people for years and years and years already. You know, why would that particular interview not fucking get coverage, right? Well, maybe, and this is a speculation, okay? This is only a fucking speculation, all right? Like, but maybe it was this. In the interview, Wilson asked him, what is the cause of violence? The primary cause of violence in Northern Ireland today. The standard line at that time, right? The propaganda line was that it was a sectarian conflict, and it remains today. I mean, this is you'll hear this today still in news reports about Northern Ireland, that it was a sectarian conflict between Irish Catholics and Protestants, right? And that was the cause. Nothing about the presence of the British military, right? Or nothing about the fucking hundreds of years of fucking imperialism, right, from the British military. So MacBride said, yo, the cause of violence is the partition of Ireland. That's the primary cause of violence in Ireland. A border in Ireland, a hard border in Ireland, right? This is reminiscent of the whole Brexit bullshit conversation in the last few years, the hard border and the partition of Ireland, et cetera, right? That was the primary cause of violence, said MacBride. That, him saying the truth like that, could have been the reason why Wilson never saw that interview published in Irish and English magazines and journals. Also, it may not have been, but he was left scratching his head, and Wilson was already an accomplished writer with a name, interviewing some heavy hitters. Why wouldn't that interview get published? And isn't that some interesting shit, right? all these years later. So it's been almost 23 years since the Good Friday Agreements, which brought more peace to Ireland, which Sean McBride wanted, but it didn't unite Ireland, right? And Ireland right now, Sinn Féin is putting out this thing, not to just promote whatever that. There's a push by Irish Republicans to get the unity referendum going in Ireland, which means to finally unite Ireland, right, under constitutional law of the Republic of Ireland. And you know what? How could you not fucking support that? Peace to the Protestants who live there. But honestly, I feel like you'll be all right. You'll be all right when it's Ireland. The Irish won't fuck you up. You'll be fine, you know? So, on that note, 105 years after the Easter Uprising, we fall and we rise, right? I'm saying peace to DMX. May you rise, whatever form that is, here on earth, or with your man up in the sky, you know? Peace to Robert Anton Wilson, and peace to Sean McBride, a man that was born in war but died in peace. Peace.